The early evening light bathed Windsor Castle in a golden hue, yet for Catherine, Princess of Wales, it felt like the sun was setting on something far more fragile: trust. She stood near the tall window of her private sitting room, her fingers absently brushing the embroidered curtains, eyes fixed on the courtyard below where children's laughter drifted faintly from the gardens. George, Charlotte, and Louis were playing tag with a nanny, blissfully unaware of the storm quietly brewing in their parents' world. Kate had been sensing it for months: William's late-night calls behind closed doors, his silences over breakfast, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes. He was a man who could keep a secret when necessary, but this was different. This was personal. She'd asked him twice, maybe 3 times, what was wrong, and each time he'd brushed it off with the same line: when the time is right. That right time had never come. Until tonight. Her heart quickened at the sound of footsteps approaching down the corridor. She turned as William entered, his usually steady posture weighed down by something heavy. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it for a moment, as if steadying himself. "We need to talk," he said. Kate gestured for him to sit, but he stayed standing, pacing once before stopping by the fireplace. The flames were low, casting flickers of light across his face. She could see it in his eyes, the same look he'd had when his grandmother passed, and when Harry's memoir hit the shelves. Except this time, there was something sharper beneath the sadness. "I've been keeping something from you," William began, his voice low but firm. Kate's chest tightened. "You've been distant. I thought maybe it was the pressure. The press." Or, she trailed off, unwilling to finish the thought. "It's not about the press," he said quickly. "It's about my mother." Her breath caught. Diana's absence was the quiet undercurrent in their lives, a memory never far from conversation but rarely dwelled upon for too long. Kate had always known there were things William didn't talk about, wounds too deep to reopen, but she had never imagined he would frame them this way. "What about her?" William moved to the mantel, resting his hands on it as though bracing against a wave. "For years I believed what we were all told. That it was a tragic accident. But I've recently been told, it wasn't that simple. That there were things leading up to it, choices, warnings, and people that don't match the official story." Kate's mouth went dry. "Who told you this?" He shook his head. "Someone who worked closely with her. Someone who's only come forward now, after all these years. They gave me documents, photographs, conversations she had." She was scared, Kate. She thought someone was going to silence her. Kate's pulse pounded in her ears. The very idea was dangerous, and yet, deep down, not entirely unbelievable. Diana had always been outspoken, unafraid to confront power. That had made her beloved by millions, but it had also made her enemies. "I didn't tell you sooner," William continued, "because I didn't want you or the children involved. Once you know, you can't unknow it. And if anyone thinks you know, you might be in danger too." Her hands gripped the armrest of her chair, knuckles whitening. "William, you can't carry something like this alone." His eyes met hers, blue and fierce, but beneath the strength she saw the boy who'd walked behind his mother's coffin. "I have too. For now. But I need you to promise me, whatever happens next, you'll protect the children first." Kate felt the sting of tears but forced herself to hold them back. She had to be steady, for him, for their family. Still, the question pressed against her lips, aching to be spoken. "What exactly did they tell you?" she asked. William hesitated, then said, "That my mother's death wasn't fate. It was decided." The room seemed to shrink, the air thick. Kate drew a slow breath, keeping her composure, but inside, her world tilted. The days that followed were a blur of scheduled appearances and smiling photographs, the public face of royalty masking the private fracture beneath. Kate played her part flawlessly, shaking hands, cutting ribbons, exchanging polite words with strangers. But each time she caught William's gaze across a crowded room, she saw the shadow in his expression. At night, when the palace was quiet, they would meet in hushed corners of their private quarters, piecing together the fragments of what he'd learned. William showed her the documents, faded memos, handwritten notes from Diana's personal stationery, and transcripts of conversations. One in particular chilled Kate. "If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident." The handwriting was unmistakable. Kate traced the words with her fingers, feeling an almost physical ache in her chest. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why would someone bring this to you after all these years? Because they're dying, William replied grimly. And they said they don't want to take the truth to the grave. They spent hours discussing what to do. Bringing the information to the police was risky. There were forces, William believed, that would bury it before it reached daylight. Going to the press could ignite a storm that might tear the monarchy apart. One evening, as rain lashed against the palace windows, Kate finally asked the question that had haunted her since he'd first told her. Do you want justice, or revenge? William stared at her for a long moment, then looked away. I want the truth out there. I want people to know she was right to be afraid. And I want the people who did this to never sleep soundly again. Kate stepped closer, placing her hand on his arm. Then we need to be careful. If this is as deep as you think, one wrong move could destroy more than just us. But as the weeks passed, the decision seemed to make itself. Pieces of the story began leaking to foreign outlets, journalists from as far as Australia and Canada sniffing around with questions they shouldn't have been able to ask. Someone else had the same information, and they weren't staying quiet. The tipping point came during a charity gala in London. William had been unusually tense all evening, his smile mechanical. Just as dessert was being served, an aide leaned down and whispered in his ear. Kate saw his jaw clench, and moments later, he excused himself from the table. When she found him in the corridor, he was holding his phone, reading an email. He looked up at her, his face pale. It's out, he said. Everything. The photos, the notes, all of it. A reporter in New York has published the first part already. By tomorrow, the world will know. Kate's breath caught. And us. We'll be asked for comment. We'll be pressured to deny it. But I won't. For a moment, they just stood there, the enormity of it pressing down on them. Then Kate, for the first time since that night in the sitting room, let the tears come. They slid down her cheeks silently, and William, seeing them, finally reached for her. I'm sorry, he murmured into her hair. I didn't want to bring you into this. But now, it's ours to face together. And as the rain continued to fall outside, Kate realized that the truth William had let slip wasn't just about the past. It was about the future they would now have to navigate, side by side, against forces far larger than themselves.